tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal that's hit him on the pad. He's out. Lions gone. New South Wales are 9 down. Onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car. Oh, I think it's hit a car. What a way to bring up your 50.
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Well, a day of pure dominance for Australia at Galle. They absolutely pasted the Sri Lankan attack. They finish day one of the Warne Murali-Dhuran series at 2 for 130 after 82 overs. Play ended early because there was a slight shower. So this recording's gone early so I can get to bed. Usman Khawaja was 147 not out. Smith was 104 not out. Those two have 195 unbeaten run partnership at the moment. A purely dominant day for Australia. Khawaja bringing up his ton after a long time since 2023 in June in Edgbaston, and Smith bringing up his 35th test century and his 10,000th test run. What a day for Australia after Smith won the toss and elected to bat. I'm going to go through the whole day, talk about the team selection, some of the big moments of today, but you have to say Australia dominated, but Sri Lanka had their chances and they absolutely blew it. They had head plumb early where they didn't review it. They gave Khawaja a couple of lives, and then they dropped Steve Smith third ball on one, which would have had Australia losing 3 quick wickets before lunch. In the end, it was costly because they didn't take another wicket for the day. So as dominant as it was for Australia, Sri Lanka had their openings to get into the middle order, but just not good enough. And the old adage, as Mark Waugh often says, fielding is the difference between teams. And in this case, it certainly was. Let's talk about the Australian team selection. So, look, in our preview, we got most of the team right. Australia opted to drop wonder kid Sam Constas and put Travis Head up the top of the order with Usman Khawaja. I think there's a fair bit of blowback about that. I think some people are still unhappy with the decision. I personally don't think it was the right call. But I guess it comes from a theoretical perspective. I think it's time to move on from Khawaja sooner rather than later. But if the selectors are thinking, no, we're not going to, and he's going to play in the Ashes next summer, then probably they had to stick with him at the top of the order, considering his run scoring in the subcontinent, which meant Sam Constas was gone. I do like the idea of bringing Travis Head up to open. I would have done it with Constas. Then maybe you could have put Khawaja at 5 and not picked Inglis. But I have to say, as disappointed as I am about Sam Constas not being picked and them sticking with a 38-year-old battler, I have to say I'm thrilled for Josh Inglis to finally get a test cap. He comes in that number 5 spot. He's test cap number 470 for Australia. He was born in Leeds in the UK, but don't hold that against him. He's a fantastic cricketer. And it's a good selection because we've seen Inglis in the past in limited overs cricket perform really well in spinning conditions. He was in top form in the Shield. He was leading run scorer for a while before he got taken away for the international honours. So he's in terrific form. And I guess the way the selectors might be thinking is, look, Inglis has been around the Australian side for a long time on a lot of tours, and I think they want to get him involved in the test lineup however they can. Carey's done so well with the gloves and at 7 recently that they can't make a change there. So it's the perfect opportunity, and it's good. It's in a good spot in the lineup. If he comes in at 5, he can play that counter-attacking innings. You know, you've got Head at the top who's going to slog from ball 1. Then you've got Inglis can really take the game on. Interestingly, Alex Carey is listed at 6 in this lineup and Webster at 7. I think that's for two reasons. I think it's to go right-hander, left-hander, right-hander at 5, 6, 7. And I also think it's because Carey's shown, a bit like Inglis, that he can reverse sweep and play all sorts of funky shots. So I think that's why they've structured it up. And I think it's also to, as I said, get that left-hander in there. So for Sri Lanka, they picked Asitha Fernando as their one and only fast bowler. Then they picked off spinner Nishan Peiris and only his second test. And I just heard Jason Gillespie on the radio saying he doesn't think much of his bowling, gave him a real serve. Prabhat Jayasuriya, as we spoke about in the preview, the left arm spinner who destroyed Australia last time, he was picked. And then they went for Jeffrey Van der Sade, the leg spinner who plays in Sri Lanka's white ball teams, and it's only his second test match. Now, Australia won the toss and elected to bat. Huge moment in the game. The fact that Smith called correctly and was able to bat first in this pitch, they can start to maybe dictate the game from here, and they don't have to bat last. So that's a huge tick straight away. Australia off to a big start. Now, after the toss, and I think before the start of play, after Australia's team was announced, Test selector Tony Donamaid held an impromptu press conference with the Australian media to talk about Sam Constance's axing, and he basically stressed that it's not a development tour. This tour, it's a series that Australia wants to win. Australia hasn't won a Test series in Sri Lanka since 2011, and they have a poor record on the subcontinent. So that they're picking the team to win this Test match, and they're not thinking about the future, which is why they've gone for Khawaja over Constance. If that's your reasoning, fine. It's hard to argue with that. Will it hinder maybe future tours? Maybe Constance could have done with a run here, but hard to argue with them. The other thing is Australia touted a lot at the end of the Border Gavaskar series that they held all the bilateral trophies. So I guess if Australia were to lose this series and cough it up, then that would be gone pretty quickly. So Australia strode out to bat, and straight away you could tell the pitch was very slow, very easy to bat on. Travis Head hit 3 boundaries in the first over and got Australia off to an absolute flyer of a start. But he would have been out LBW to Fernando when the score was 32. He was on 23. A ball hit him on the pad, hitting middle and off stump. They thought about referring it, but they didn't refer it. And I think you saw the referral come up on the screen there, and you could see the Sri Lankans shaking their heads. Just to give you an idea of what the pitch was like, the second over, they brought on a spinner, the Sri Lankans, so they didn't even have a medium pace through. They started with spin, and it didn't work. Australia reached 50 of just 8.3 overs. They absolutely got out of the gates really quickly, and Travis Head stroked to 50 off 35 deliveries, absolutely smashed them all over the place. And it was typical Travis Head. He was hitting straight when the ball was pitched up, played a lot of sweep shots. Fernando didn't bowl well in his first spell, some short stuff that Head absolutely pounced on because the pitch is so slow. If you drop short, you can just feast on it. And so before Head was out, there was a review off one of the spinners. I think it was Paris, where Head was hit just outside the off stump, and Sri Lanka went to review it. It didn't happen because the ball was hitting outside off stump, and I think they used that review because they felt bad about missing him before. But he was eventually gone. Travis Head for 57 off 40 balls, 10 fours and 1 6. The score was 92 off just 14.3 overs. I mean, it was electric stuff to start the Test match. It was must-watch cricket. So that brought Marnus Labuschagne out to the crease. He was pretty good. He looked quite good. He didn't give any chances, but he survived a review off Nishan Peiris. He was sweeping one, and it was umpire's call hitting leg stump. So it was given not out on the field. They reviewed it, and he just survived an umpire's call. At this stage, Usman Khawaja went to his 50 of just 71 deliveries. He played really well up at the other end. He started quite quickly, and he looked positive as well. And in fact, if I look at the whole day, one thing that struck me was the positive intent from the Australians. I think they were aware that this is the best day to bat, so they really wanted to make use of the conditions. The conditions are only going to get worse, and we saw Head, Khawaja, Labuschagne, and Smith all come out of the gates really strong. Only did scoring really slow down when the Sri Lankans just before and after tea resort to very negative tactics where they aim for outside the Aussies' leg stump and just try to dry the runs up. But apart from that, Australia were very positive from beginning of the day. And I think they, as I said, they just wanted to make use of the conditions and realizing, look, it's not the sort of pitch where you can hang around and poke around. But Sri Lanka didn't bowl well. The tactics weren't good, and they really paid for it. So Khawaja was dropped on 54 by the skipper at first slip off Jay Saria, edged one, and De Silva it was just on to his left hand low, and he dropped it. He then also, there was an edge through to the keeper that they didn't refer. They appealed on the ground. I think it was off Jay Saria as well. They seemed to think it was out, but maybe they were a bit gun shy after losing a review earlier, so they didn't use it. So Khawaja survived there. And there was also one where Khawaja hit one onto his pad and it went over the wicket keeper. So 3 chances for Khawaja, and you just cannot give a player of his quality that many chances. So then Labuschagne was out for 20 of 50 deliveries, just driving at the leg spinner Van der Say. The skipper De Silva caught him in first slip, and that made the score 2 for 135 after just 30 overs. So it was, as I said, fast forward cricket from the beginning. So then the man on 9,999 test runs, Steve Smith, came to the crease. And so that it was 5:25 local time in Sydney when he brought up his 10,000th test run. He's the 4th Australian to do that, the 15th overall. It was the 5th fastest in history in terms of innings. It's the joint 2nd fastest in terms of test matches. Lara got there in 111 tests. Kumar Sangakkara, who's been on the podcast before, got there in 115 test matches. So a really amazing moment. He hit the ball, was it mid-on, and just took off. Maybe it was mid-off, just took off straight away. Like first ball, he just wasn't going to muck around. I think Khawaja would have been ready for it. Smith wanted to get this record out of the way. And this is so funny, like the way Smith is. He's such a competitive bastard. I can't tell you. He's a bit like Mark Waugh, when he's one of those guys that was never out, was never beaten by a bowler. It was always an excuse. And Smith is like that. So I heard Smith say to a reporter after the Sydney test that, oh yeah, the 10,000th run was actually on my mind. And I was thinking about it a lot in the lead up to my dismissal at the SCG. Maybe it affected him a little bit. And then before this test match, he's asked the same thing. And he says, oh, no. The ball just jumped off a length at the SCG and it was irregular bounce and it got me out. So he's such a competitive bastard. He can never concede. Maybe he made a mistake or the mark got into him. So anyway, he got there, 10,000 test runs, an amazing moment. He was his average when he got there was 55.87, and from Crick Info, this stat is it is the 4th best among the 15 players who have surpassed this mark, behind Ponting, Tendulkar, and Sangakkara. So he's had a phenomenal career, however which way you want to spin it. And I have loved covering Smith so much. I have loved it so much. I was lucky enough to grow up, sort of watching that 90s and 2000s era where there were so many champions. I can list them all, but Bordeaux, the War Brothers, Gilly, Hayden, Langer, Punter, you name them all. There's so many champions that played for Australia in that era. So, McGrath, Warne, Gillespie, some just absolute guns. And then after that, there was a period where Australia battled, and it's not like they didn't have any good players. Obviously, Michael Clarke, an exceptional batter, had a couple of years at the top of the world, but when Smith came along in 2013, scored that 100 at the Oval, a few days after the very first cricket podcast I did. So I've been really following his career very closely from the beginning, and he has been that champion that Australian cricket yearned for. No one has come close in the recent times. Warner, all these other pretenders, Marnus, they haven't come close. Smith averages the same at home as he does away. He can play anywhere. He can make hundreds anywhere. He can do it on ragging turners in India. He can do it on green tops in Edgbaston. He can do it against the quickest bowlers in the world. He can do it against the best spinners in the world. I mean, this is a champion, and we are so lucky to see him. I would, it's really hard to split Ponting and Smith because they both had such amazing peaks. But I guess we'll see the way Smith ends his career. Can he sort of get up to Smith's, to Ponting's level of Test hundreds? But Smith, just such a servant of Australian cricket. He was really hard done by around the sandpaper gate thing. I think history should look kinder on those players. Even though they made a mistake, he was hard done by, severe penalties. And, I've been thinking that with Pat Cummins' captaincy, wouldn't it be the perfect time for him to step down at the end of this World Test Championship cycle? Cummins, he's got a young family. He's got apparently an ankle problem. Maybe at the end of this World Test Championship cycle, Pat Cummins should stand down as skipper, and Steve Smith could just skipper the side for a couple of years. I mean, he averages 70 with the bat as skipper. It brings the best out of him. So maybe he could have a couple of years as skipper before retirement. He could maybe, they could develop some leaders under him, some players to take over. So he's just a phenomenal player, but could have all been over after 3 balls. He gets his 10,000 runs, blocks another one. Next one hits a caught and bowled chance to Jay Surya, and he dropped it. Again, Sri Lanka fluffing their lines. That would have been 3 quick wickets. It would have been Smith out, and they didn't get another wicket after that. Australia went to lunch at 2 for 145, and it was dominance from there. So after lunch, Usman Khawaja brought up his 16th Test century. He's stuck it to me, that's for sure. 100 off 135 balls. His first since June 2023. A couple of stats. Nick Savage, a friend of the show, said Usman Khawaja has become the first Australian opener to score a Test century after their 38th birthday since Lindsay Hassett in 1953. That's a great stat. Thank you, Nick. And Khawaja is also the oldest player to score a Test century for Australia since Steve Waugh's 100, the last ball of the day 100 at the SCG in 2003. So great stuff from Khawaja. He's I don't know if he's like locked in his spot for the Ashes next summer, but he's gone a long way to making the selectors have a tough time to drop him. I guess you've got the World Test Championship final, then you've got 3 tests in the West Indies before the Ashes. But unless Khawaja retires, it's going to be tough for the selectors, which is another reason they should have dropped him for this match. But anyway, great stuff. 16 Test hundreds. That 16th was a long time coming, and he got there. Then Smith went to his 50 off just 57 balls. He came out smoking them, using his feet early on, hitting the ball down the ground, lofting the spinners straight. I don't think Sri Lanka bowled particularly well, and we've just seen how good Smith is in these conditions. And he and Khawaja, beautiful partnership, and they took the score to tea at 2 for 261. But then things slowed down either side of tea. We saw the Sri Lankans employ very negative tactics, and at one point I think Van der Say, the umpire, spoke to Van der Say and maybe gave him an official warning about negative bowling. I don't think it's the way Test cricket should be played. I don't like it at all. But you can understand the Sri Lankans trying it because they were getting carded all over the place. And it did help. There was a period of about 13 overs where Australia didn't score a boundary before and after tea. So they really were able to slow the scoring down. But as Australia, to their credit, just milked the runs and didn't get frustrated and get themselves out. I mean, that's the advantage of having 2 very experienced players, because in these conditions, Australia needs to score, I would say, above 450 after this start at least. You need big runs on the board to defend. So it's no good for Australia to just get out for around 350, 400 after that start. So they did the right thing, just digging in, soaking up the pressure. And then we saw Smith bring up his 35th Test 100 of just 179 balls. Truly a magnificent innings. And he's back. 3 centuries in his last 4 Test matches. He's now clear on second in terms of Test hundreds for Australia. So just Ponting above him now. And that's just an amazing achievement. And it was a top innings. And Steve Smith loves being captain. Boy, does he love it. It brings the best out of him with the bat. And Ponting described Smith's 100 as effortless. And it really was effortless. So there, Australia batted through until stumps, as I said, 2 for 330. And the rain came and the play ended early for the Australian batting innings. They had to go off, and in the end, they just weren't able to get back out there. So 81.1 overs were bowled. Amazingly, at one stage they were ahead of the over rate. Haven't seen that for a long, long time. So anyway, terrific stuff. So Khawaja will resume on 147. Smith will resume on 104. So Smith is 600 behind Ponting. Ponting has 41, Smith 35, Waugh 32, and then Hayden 30. So yeah, maybe Smith can catch Ponting now. There was some doubt he would be able to do it, but this little run of hundreds, if he can continue like this, you would have to think the West Indies, there could be some centuries on offer, the second test here. Maybe Smith can catch Ponting. So Australia on top in this match, absolutely. I just want to talk a little bit about the coverage before we wrap this up. So Channel 7 providing free-to-air coverage, and it's fantastic, and they are plastering ads. Look, I haven't seen much 7 cricket over the summer, but they're plastering ads all over it saying how good it is. They're giving free coverage, free cricket. And I have to agree with them. They do have they had an interesting hybrid model of coverage for the first day. So on day 1, they had Ponting, Copeland, and Blewett in studio, and they had commentary team over there. And I think they have full commentary over there going on as well, because at one stage they had the studio team here talking, but then the cameraman there had footage of Collins and Russell Arnold commentating over there. So Channel 7 were putting some of their in-studio commentary over the top of what's going on there. Very strange. I don't mind it. Obviously, you want to hear from Ponting, Blewett, Copeland as well. But you do want to hear from Ponting. But my understanding is that's just for the first day. So Channel 7, what they've done is they've pulled out all the big guns for the first day. But my understanding is Ponting and that in-studio stuff, I think, will be different moving forward for the rest of the test matches. I think we'll just get more a traditional coverage where they take the commentary from over in India with Adam Collins and Simon Kadich and the great Sri Lankan commentators and Russell Arnold, who I've commentated with before. So they'll just take that. But I don't think we'll see a hybrid model moving forward. There was some strange commentary, like I think the Travis Head one, he was caught on the boundary and the commentator thought it was going for 6, but then it was caught and people were saying, oh, was he in studio? But my understanding, he was at the ground. He just got that wrong. It was just Copeland, Ponting and Blewett doing a bit of in-studio stuff here. I didn't mind the coverage, but I did have a couple of people messaging me saying, it's a bit crappy, the coverage. And I just have to say we are spoiled here. We have amazing cricket coverage. The cameramen are excellent. There's always a ton of cameras at the ground. I mean, that's what it comes down to is. So I imagine Channel 7 is taking the Sri Lankan coverage that is the local broadcast. And good cricket coverage all comes down to, the skill of the camera work and how many cameras are there. And, we know in Australia that Seven and Fox, put so much effort into their coverage of cricket that, it's fantastic. So I thought the coverage was fine. I enjoyed it. It was magnificent day's cricket, batting exhibition from Steve Smith and Usman Khawaja and Travis Head, and exhilarating stuff. All right, well, that's it for my day one wrap of the first test from Gaul of the Warren Murali-Dhuran Trophy. Tomorrow, I've got Mark Machado on, who is based out of London, big Sri Lankan cricket fan. He'll be joining me tomorrow, so it won't just be solo manners. But, all on Australia now to make the most of this start. I've seen Australian teams go from 2 for 330 to all out for 380. That can't happen. Australia needs to go on 2 for 330. I would say, 500 should be the minimum from here. Surely 8 wickets for 170 is not unattainable. Then we can really dominate the game. And if Australia can sneak a win here, then trophy retained. And maybe they can get a bit funky with selection for the next test match. All right, you've been listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Menners. Don't forget, rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back after day 2.